You're watching Living Clean, Living Well, Canada's only live interactive television talk show that deals with addiction, substance abuse, and trauma. And addictions and substance abuse certainly been making headlines across Canada and really around the world for the last little while. We have alleged drug use and alleged drug dealing from some of Toronto's top elected officials, but they are allegations only. They have not been proven, but nevertheless, the headlines are out there. So we're going to ask the question tonight. We're not talking about Rob Ford, the Toronto mayor. We're not talking about Councillor Doug Ford. We are talking about how the headlines may have affected you and your family. Have they brought issues into the spotlight for you? Tonight we're going to be taking your phone calls. We're also going to be talking about the DSM-5. Now, if you don't know what that is, don't worry, you're not alone, but it's very controversial, and we're going to tell you what you need to know and how it could possibly affect how you are diagnosed down the road. And there's a few weeks left still in spring, not too late to house clean your way into recovery. We've got the top 10 tips for you. So that's our show for you tonight. Let's get rolling. I'd like to welcome to the show tonight regular contributor Dr. Vera Tarman, who's the Medical Director of Health at Reticent. Welcome, Vera.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm always happy to be back.
And Dee Christensen is back with us. She is Editor-in-Chief with Recovery Wire magazine. Glad to have you back.
Happy to be here.
So let's just put it out on the table tonight, the story that everybody's talking about, but we want to see how it has been affecting you. So we're not going to be taking phone calls about what's been going on with the allegations against Rob Ford and also Doug Ford. We're not talking about them for now. We're talking about how it may affect you. Let's put it out on the table. Dr. Tarman, I'd like you to go first, please. Do headlines, and Hollywood celebrities as well, we hear about their problems with addictions and substance abuse. Can headlines affect people and how they are dealing with their own lives?
Well, the thing that I really get out of this is the stigma that's attached to addiction. And even if it doesn't matter if the issue is, if the allegations are true or not, it would be hard as a professional, as a public spokesperson to come out and be honest in any kind of way, even regardless of what the situation is, because there's such stigma around it. And it reminds me, if I were to think in my own personal example, as a professional, to be honest, the shame, the stigma, it's going to affect my reputation. I mean, there's much larger issues in the actual addiction that has to be dealt with that makes it very difficult to get over that first hurdle of being honest, either with other colleagues or with myself. So that's the piece that I really take from this.
Dee has been on our show before. You may remember her from Recovery Wire magazine. I loved your honesty. And I love the fact she came right on and she said, I am in recovery from alcohol and also drug issues. Yeah. I'd love to hear what you have to say about headlines and how it can affect people.
Yeah, any kind of addiction issue in the media, regardless whether it's a celebrity or a public official, the way that it triggers me personally and most people I think in recovery is that, it reminds us of all of those issues that come so close to home, the issues of personal responsibility and denial and enmeshment. It brings you back to feeling so uncomfortable having to watch a mirror image of what you were once like, or what you're currently like for people who are still suffering. So, I don't think the actual person in the media is really what we're drawn to. I think we're drawn to all of the ways that we respond to that, how it's triggering us, and that's what's really important to focus on.
Yeah. And that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. So folks, if you'd like to talk about how the headlines may be affecting you, perhaps a family member, we're going to be taking your calls. And also, as always, we're going to be taking your calls on general questions as well. As I like to say, the doctor is in the house. She is here to take your phone calls as well. So any general questions you may have. Now, I also told you at the top of the show about this DSM-5. We've been talking about this anticipated arrival of this. The DSM-5 stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It is into its 5th version. So they were running with the DSM-4. Now it's the DSM-5. It's headed by the American Psychiatric Association. Dr. Tarman, can you tell us what it is that we need to know and why some people are concerned about it?
Well, it's already received a backlash even before it got published. Already a year before, the American Psychological Association has been already brewing lots of discontent, and really the discontent is all about the fact that we fear that essentially the medical profession is pathologizing normal negative emotions, and that's a real concern. it's a real concern because it diminishes the fact, it hides the fact that life is, or tries to change the fact that life has ups and downs. And so any of the downs are now considered sickness. So if I'm not feeling great, there's something wrong with me and I've got to go and see a doctor and maybe take medication. So we're really worried about that, especially in addictions where there's feeling down is, the person has been spending most of their life trying to avoid feeling down by using their substance, and now they're going to get a double message. The recovery counselor is saying, no, you've got to learn to deal with these things, here are the tools, but now we're going to get this message that no, in fact, we should be feeling happy all the time. It's leading a false expectation.
Am I correct in saying that perhaps the drug companies could be rubbing their hands with glee?
Well, for sure they are, and that's been the basis of the criticism, is that most of the people who have been on both the panel to make the actual criteria for the diagnosis, and the people who have chosen the criteria, the judges themselves, are all funded by by the drug companies. And the research that's being used has also been largely funded by the drug companies. So it's a tainted book in that perspective.
So let's put it into layman's terms. Somebody presents to you with depression. How was it treated before with DSM-4, and how has 5 now changed that?
Well, so for people who have severe depression or even moderate depression, we would have called that depression before. But now what's going to happen is that people who get depressed every once in a while, just basically, because we can't be up all the time, can say, look, if I ask you when you're in a depressed mood, are you depressed all the time? It's the nature, it's the bias that we're going to say, yes, we're depressed all the time. And the criteria is going to get so diluted that it's virtually, I fear, this is my fear, that anybody is going to walk in and definitely walk out with a diagnosis. So what we're worried about, and this is how it might be applied to people listening, is the credibility of a diagnosis, I think, is going to become undermined. And it's so undermined that there are even people like the National Institute of Mental Health in the States that have said, we are not going to back this up anymore. Because it doesn't mean anything anymore. So a person is, how many people go to see a doctor? They have the expectation that this is based on science, this is based on sound evidence, and so therefore, if I'm told I'm depressed or anxious or something, it must be true, is in fact, it's not credible anymore. Yeah.
Dee, your thoughts on DSM-5?
Yeah. It's a really big deal for those of us who are frontline workers in addiction right now. And part of the reason is that what has happened with the DSM-5 is that we have broadened the scope of how we diagnose. And so what that means is that rather than us, for myself as an addict, I can say that, what we focus on is the actual behavior itself. And what this is doing is broadening the spectrum of how we actually label people. So we can now label way more people. This has broadened the scope of obsessive compulsive disorders. It's made a much wider array of types of obsessive compulsive disorders. So no longer are we focusing on the behavior itself and on how to handle that behavior, but now we're actually broadening the spectrum of applying labels to people, which I think it's irresponsible for us to not acknowledge that is having a psychosomatic effect on people. Rather than me just saying I'm being obsessive today or I'm feeling depressed today, I'm depressed or I'm suffering a compulsive disorder, and aside from that, I don't actually feel that the mental health community is prepared to be able to alleviate these kinds of things. Most of the psychiatrists in the community don't necessarily study cognitive behavioral therapies, so we don't actually have a lot of ways to handle all of these disorders that we're going to be dishing out. And so really what we're doing is just going to be medicating. There's just going to be a lot more people that qualify for medication.
So there it is. Boom.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that's benefiting the people suffering from addictions themselves.
Dr. Tarman, you were saying that that's what the bottom line is.
Yeah, I think
that now they can just hand pills.
Yeah, right, and that's right. And clinicians generally don't have the time to do all these things at your suggestion. And the other thing that seems to be happening is that people, when they get the diagnosis, they first of all they believe that it's based on something that's a real entity. They don't know that the DSM-5 is, or in fact any of the diagnostic manuals, has been a consensual agreement amongst professionals about what they think depression or bipolar or whatever it is. It's not based on hard science. We just haven't got that science yet. It's a consensual agreement, and it changes every few years. And what ends up happening is that people get a diagnosis, they think, oh, this means that there's something wrong in my brain, and therefore I can't do things that I should otherwise, that my counselor is telling me to do, because there's something wrong with me. So, you know, when a person's depressed, we make the suggestion, go out and, well, you're going to highlight some of these things. All the things that you're going to suggest, they're going to say, but I can't do those because I am this. And when in fact, these are the very things that are going to help you.
I got to tell you, if in the beginning someone had given me some kind of a label that would have allowed my brain in the beginning to negate responsibility, as opposed to doing all of the hard work that we do on the front lines, but instead given me some kind of a label to allow me to say, well, I suffer from a disorder. I think that would have changed my recovery process dramatically.
Yeah, you know, I do want to say that that it's true that it's not to say that mental disorder does not exist, but we're losing the real, I think, the people who are really suffering with this diluted, generalized approach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there it is. A lot of questions, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last time that we talk about the DSM-5. If you folks have any questions at home, if you want to learn a little bit more, if you want to ask Dr. Tarman, and also Dee Christensen is extremely well read on the subject, because like I said, it's been anticipated for some time now, and there were little inklings of what it was going to be, but the backlash has been severe. And like I said at the top of the show, this could affect how you are diagnosed and the type of treatment that you will receive. And you really need to learn, and we all need to learn about this. So if you want to talk about the DSM-5, we're here for you. We're going to be opening up our toll-free lines right after this commercial break. And also, general questions, please. We're here to answer them. And also, talking about the headlines that have been in the news lately about the allegations of drug use by some of our top elected officials in Toronto. They were allegations only. They have not been proven. But has that triggered you? And possibly maybe it's got you thinking about things about yourself, your life, or maybe a loved one. So we are here. We are here for you. When we come back after this commercial break, we're going to be talking from a neat little group of top 10 tips on how to house clean your way to recovery, and that's from Recovery Wire magazine. So our first break here on Living Clean, Living Well. When we come back, more from Dr. Tarman and Dee Christensen. Welcome back, everybody. So glad that you're joining us here on this Sunday night. We've got so much to talk about, and of course, as always, you're a big part of this show, so give us a call if you'd like to talk to us as well. Dee Christensen from Recovery Wire magazine is joining us, as well as Dr. Tarman is here, our regular contributor on Living Clean, Living Well, and you've got a big gala to tell us about.
Yes, we're having a really amazing celebration on June 15th, and you know, we're just celebrating recovery. It's a really amazing sober event, so if you're looking for a great party, we have live jazz, we have mocktails, we have a lot of fun coming up, so it's a fundraiser to try and raise money for the addictions community, and we're really excited about it. You can visit our website, recoverywiremagazine.com, and buy tickets there, and it goes to a great cause. It's going to be a great night.
And it's a great way to meet people if you're new to recovery and you want to find some safe people to hang out with.
Oh, it's an awesome event. Glad that we could mention it. We're going to go to our toll-free lines now, and calling in from Toronto is Linda. Linda, glad to have you on the show tonight. Have you got a question or a comment for us?
I do. I find this topic so intriguing, and I'm just captured. And thank you for taking the time to listen to me.
You bet.
I am, I guess, what you would call an addictive personality. And I just have recently, by an addiction counselor, been told that I may have attention deficit disorder. I've seen psychotherapists since I was 18 years old, and I'm 57. And the psychotherapeutic process wasn't very helpful for me. But medication, I'm under the impression that if a doctor or a psychiatrist prescribes it for one of these psychotherapeutic illnesses, that you're not allowed to take your drug of choice. So isn't that more beneficial in the long run than being an alcoholic or a heroin addict or et cetera, et cetera? Because I was told that now through my addiction counselor that a stimulant is required for people that are ADD. So perhaps, that if you quit the rest and you take Celebrex or you take something else and stop the drug that you've been using, that's really a deterrent and obviously very detrimental to your psychological and physiological health, and you believe that it's helping, that would be more beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Tarman, would you like to start off?
Well, I mean, you're right. It would be more beneficial, and it depends on how you're looking at addictions treatment. Like if you're following what we call a harm reduction model, using a stimulant that's prescribed to you rather than one that you get off the street is certainly better than taking the one off the street. The harm is reduced significantly. If you're wanting to follow an abstinence model, which is that you want to get clean and sober and actually experience the benefits of that, then taking the stimulant is not going to help you, especially it won't get you the same result. One of the things that you may not know about, because here's kind of what we were alluding to in the earlier on, is that depending on how much time your clinician has, there are actually techniques and tools that people with attention deficit can learn in ways of how to actually learn to focus that don't require medication. Mm-hmm. They require a lot of training, and it's not your standard psychotherapeutic training. My guess is you probably haven't had that, but they are very specific tools. There are actually attention deficit disorder therapists who focus just on that area. And I think that if you wanted to be safe from drug use and not wanted to take medication either, there is another venue or avenue that you may not have actually been told about yet.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to weigh in, Dee?
That's really the most important aspect of it for me. It's not like we're supporting or not supporting the idea of medication. Mm-hmm. It's that what we're trying to say at the magazine is that we back on the side of, have we tried everything else? Are we doing all the other things that we can do? Because ADD symptoms can really mimic eating improperly. They can mimic deficiencies. They can mimic sleep improper.
Yes.
They can be alleviated by learning to meditate. Like there are so many other homeopathic, healthy things that we can try to do, and it's just a little unnerving sometimes that we're becoming even more societally dependent upon a medical diagnosis and medication.
Yeah, especially something like ADD, because our society is so ADD in itself, and we foster that behavior even while we say that we want to, medicate it away, learning how to do behaviors that are actually antisocial, like being slower, taking your time and not multitasking, are actually the treatment for ADD. There we go right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Linda, did you have a follow-up question?
No, I find this really fascinating, and I'm really, interested in the input. But I'm afraid of overdiagnosis myself, and handles, as you were just saying, that Ford is having these problems because addiction is such a stigma, and of course we deny and the shame-based, and that's what it's all about too. So it's self-esteem issues, and that requires cognitive behavior. But I mean, if you have low self-esteem and you're depressed, men delegate, women just stuff it, you're not going to get to these meetings, and you're not going to be able to function. So I think that if you have a tool that tells someone that they have a diagnosis and that they require a certain thing, and that it's going to get them out there and get them, at least some group therapy, that might be beneficial for the short term, and then the rest will unfold from that. Because I've been in psychotherapy since I was 18. It was psychiatrists initially 30 years ago, but they don't do that anymore, and then it became cognitive and, the whole bag of tricks, and it just is, mundane. So I was thinking perhaps in this more innovative technique, if you tell someone, here's the symptoms, of course you can't say that because the person, that's what the mind does, they'll have 10 of them. The better approach is there 4 that you don't have. But if they think that they can get something out there that would help, because this is a functioning problem and we need to have people functioning. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's the bottom line.
Well done and well said. Thank you, Linda, very much for calling in tonight. Did you want to follow up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the things, Linda, that you said, I think was you really hit the bottom line, is you said short-term solution. I think that when medications work best is when they are seen as a short-term solution, because it might be that a person does require something to get over the hump, but it isn't a long-term solution for no other reason than we habituate to medication as we habituate to drugs and alcohol. And they lose their efficacy after a short period of time. So if you use it as a bridge to get to those groups and to learn some of those tools, I think that that's just great. But unfortunately, that's not. It doesn't actually end there. It ends up being the only solution. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. A question for you folks. You were mentioning tools. What's in your recovery toolkit? We've got the top 10 tips for doing a little house cleaning in this springtime. Summer's still a few more weeks away. It's coming from this edition of Recovery Wire magazine, and it's out right now. And you can get your own free copy. Dee, let's start out there and tell them how they do that, how they get their own copy.
Well, they can go onto our website at recoverywiremagazine.com. Anywhere in the world you can get a free digital subscription, and within Canada you can get free hard copies sent to you anywhere in Canada, so you can subscribe at our website. And the website's new and it's up and it's beautiful and we're very proud of it, so we'd be excited for everybody to see it and show it off.
That's great.
Yeah.
And if I can just say that even this issue about mental illness or the DSM-5 is in this issue. So if you want to write a letter to the editor giving your opinion about this issue, have a read of the magazine, and then
So let's talk about top 10 ways that you can clean your house. Top number 1, time to inventory.
Inventory, good time to do a little inventory of what the past year has been like, the good, the bad. Bad being the things you might do differently. It's a great way to start off this year.
And then financial planning.
Speaks for itself. If you have a lot of debt, if you have no idea for planning your future financially, then you don't feel as empowered. So financial planning is a great way to start off the year well.
Yeah, and then number 3 is the physical environment that we live in has a really big impact on us, more I guess than we realize. So number 3 is pick a room, any room.
That's right. Doesn't have to be a really huge undertaking. It's that storage closet that you don't think about but you avoid like the plague. It's time to dig in there and clean it out. It's amazing that if your house looks like $1 million, you can leave the house in a burlap sack and feel beautiful. So that's a great way to feel better about yourself.
Yeah, I love point number 4, which is see a nutritionist. Some fabulous things that you've got in here. I didn't know that flax seeds and walnuts help protect you against depression. That's huge. I also read that carbohydrates help the body produce serotonin, which is very good. The happy, right, Dr. Tarman? Serotonin makes you feel happy. Greasy foods have been connected to dementia. I didn't know that. Yeah, so you've got some really good tips and points in here, Dee.
It speaks for itself. See a nutritionist. There are a lot of really, like we say, there are a lot of really easy things that we can do at home to empower ourselves to get so much more out of our recovery than we do. And seeing a nutritionist is a really great, easy thing that everyone can try.
And Dr. Tarman, so important in recovery, right?
Yeah, well, diet is so important in recovery. You kind of alluded to that earlier. For example, if you're eating a lot of sweets and carbohydrates, like simple carbohydrates like bagels and pastas and breads and all that, and donuts, that contributes, if nothing else, to depression, because you get the high and then you get the low, and that low lasts a lot longer. It can last the whole day. So your moods are up and down and up and down and up and down, and so just changing that is going to change your mood.
Point number 5 on our house cleaning tips, step study. What's that?
A step study, well, if you're in a 12-step program, a step study can be it's a very intimate commitment between a group of people to actually go through all 12 of the steps, regardless of what program you might be in. And it's just a great way to read through the steps and to see them in a different way. The old saying, you can read a passage 12 times over again, but every time you get something different out of it. So it's a 12-week commitment that a small group of people can do. It's a great way to start off the summer.
Can I say something to that, just about the concept of the 12-step study? One of the things that I've been really impressed with the steps is that they really capture a lot of the tools that psychiatrists and doctors will recommend. You know, they've got the, first of all, acknowledging that you've got a problem. They've got cognitive therapy techniques in there, the whole mindfulness, which is, the craze right now of meditation, mindfulness, that's all in there. Everything that you will get from your psychiatrist or your counselor is actually in a 12-step program. So, and there you can do it for free and quickly.
Point number 6 is spiritual retreat.
Yeah. You know, it is exactly that. Spiritual retreat, there's a lot of ways to do it. There are a lot of places throughout Canada, throughout Ontario that you can go. You could actually just rent a little space somewhere in Blue Mountain or somewhere in Tremblant.
Or out west, because I know you're from out west.
Exactly, back in
Rocky
Banff.
Mountains, go sit by the sea in
Vancouver.
Vancouver.
It's the idea of retreating. You can do it in a group. You can host it. You can plan an entire program around it. But the idea is that, you shut out Father Time for a few days and you go back to Mother Nature.
It's called me time.
That's right.
A lot of people don't leave enough time for me time. Yeah. Time for a checkup, which is different from seeing the nutritionist. That's really important.
Yes.
But tell us about taking a checkup and why we need to have everything into place.
Yeah, you just, you don't want to let your physical body, you don't want to forget about your physical body, It's the platform for everything that you're doing. You want to make sure that your, blood pressure is proper. You want to make sure that we forget about doing these things. If you're female, you want to go and make sure that you have a breast exam. You want to make sure, you want to rule out all of those things, because if your recovery is going really well and your body starts to shut down, then you're sort of working in reverse, aren't you?
Dr. Tarman?
Well, it's been my experience, working in the field that people, when they finally get their checkup, oftentimes they haven't seen a doctor for years and years. So then I'll do like even just something as simple as lab work, and they find out that they've got diabetes. And you can have diabetes and not know that you have it, and have it for quite a long time. And wondering why I'm always tired and why I'm always fatigued and always craving sweets. And there's an obvious answer right there.
Number 8, create one oasis.
This is my favorite one. Because it's so much fun. So you're actually going to commit to one space. For me, it was my bedroom. And I actually went out and I shopped for little items and I repainted it. So I created one little oasis. We always watch those home and garden shows where they go in 24 hours and change everything up. So you're going to do that for one space. And you know what? I did it in so little money it would shock you. And it was a lot of fun going to buy little secondhand items and decor pieces. So you're just going to create one little oasis in your space.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Point number 9, make direct amends.
It is exactly that. It's really important not to let that get out of hand. Make a little list of all the people that you owe an amends to and make amends. You don't have to like it, but you do have to do it. You can't let your side of the street get dirty.
Now, writing reverse letters, point number 10. You were telling me this letter is to you, and you write it on behalf of the person who hurt you.
Yeah, so this is a really exciting one because it's a really great way to alleviate some of the angst that we sometimes do what we're doing to avoid. The idea is whatever painful moment you can think of in your past, you're going to go back to it, but you're going to write the letter on behalf of the antagonist. So what it's doing is it's providing you another perspective. You go back to a moment in time where maybe you felt really abandoned by your mother, but when you're writing the letter from her to you, what you're suddenly realizing is, wow, she was really young at the time. She was only 30. So she's actually telling you, what that was like for her, and it puts you in someone else's perspective, and it changes your perspective on some of the angst in your past. Yeah, it's a very powerful tool. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen people talk about that in the context of they know that their mother or father was an addict, but then they actually see, that's why they didn't do those things, because they were struggling with the very same things that I'm struggling with. And that they loved their kids as much as I love my kids, and therefore they actually love me.
Yeah, and that is an instant game changer. Yeah.
So there you go. It's spring for a couple more weeks yet. I don't know where you are living in this great country of ours, but I'm hoping that it's warm where you are, because it's been a little chilly here in southern Ontario. And I know my mom out west is really complaining about all the rain that they've been getting. So it's time to spring clean and get everything all sparkling clean. And tell me from point of view from Recovery Wire magazine, why you decided to do this and how you thought that was important in terms of recovery.
Well, especially now, we did a huge feature article on the DSM-5, and so we really wanted to highlight some of the everyday practical things that we can all do to participate in our own recovery. And these are things that we can't just do when we're new in recovery. These are things we have to do as a regular maintenance. So when we suggest these top 10 things, we're not saying do them once and that's it, you're set for life. We're saying, you know what, keep this list, and next year at this time, do the exact same thing.
Right,
imagine how different things would be, right? Yeah.
We're going to take another short break here on Living Clean, Living Well, but when we come back, more of your phone calls. We've talked about a number of issues, but it's always the same subject matter, and that's addiction, substance abuse, trauma. We cover it all here. It's a safe haven, I like to say. My guests are Dr. Vera Tarman and Dee Christensen. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Glad that you're joining us here live on CTS Television, a proud presentation of the Canadian Centre for Abuse Awareness. We are, of course, Living Clean, Living Well. My name is Teresa Cruz. I'm your host. Tonight, we have our regular contributor, Dr. Vera Tarman, with us. She's the Medical Director of Health at Renascent, and Dee Christensen. And you are a regular returnee now. She is the Editor-in-Chief of Recovery Wire magazine, and a magazine that's really Canada's leading voice in addiction and recovery and hope. And if you'd like your free copy, make sure you go to their website, and we'll have the information on throughout the show, and you can request your free copy. So let's go back to the toll-free lines right now. Calling in from Toronto on line 1 is Marianne. Hi there, Marianne. Welcome to the show. Marianne, you there? Hi.
How are you?
We're doing well. How about you? Have you got a question or a comment for us tonight?
I have been suffering from anxiety problems for probably since my teenage years, and I went on anti-anxiety medication and have become totally addicted to it. And I'm wondering if there are any places where you can go. You can go to places where you can get treatment for addiction to alcohol or street drugs. Are there places where you can go where you can get treatment for addiction to prescription drugs?
Great question, Marianne. And honey, just as I'm going to let them start answering, I want you to grab that TV remote and just turn the volume down, because it's different from what you're hearing on the phone to what you're hearing on TV. So Dr. Tarman, would you like to start with that question? Go ahead.
Okay, well, Marianne, you're asking if there's treatment centers for prescription drug use, and yes, there are. They're the very same ones for illicit drug use. The prescription drugs that are the most commonly where people require rehab are either the opiates or the sleeping pills, like yourself, like your experience. And often they require a detox, and we have detoxes that people go to before they go into rehab. But there's a whole bunch of programs. I mean, even the one that is hosted or sponsored for tonight, New Awakenings, but there's others. There's Renaissance. Pretty much any one of these programs will deal with that issue. If you're dealing with a problem with your sleeping pills, you may require a medical detox, and there are some treatment programs that actually have medical detox as part of their program, or others you just go to a detox first. But I would probably recommend that you look into some kind of medical supervision coming off of that drug, because you don't want to run into troubles when you get off of it. But the answer is yes. The short answer is yes.
Detox, that's huge, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel that she could benefit from a detox?
Well, a detox is, yes, a detox won't actually give you therapy, but what they'll do is watch you as you are withdrawing from the drug and make sure that nothing untoward happens, like a seizure or something like that. The other thing about a detox that's helpful is when you're in withdrawal, you have to be pretty committed to coming off of the drug, because it hurts. Withdrawal is very painful, and it's very hard to not say, okay, I'm just going to have a little bit so that I don't, it doesn't hurt as much. Whereas a detox, they keep an eye on you and they don't let you have that little bit, so that you're forced to go through that withdrawal, and so that it's over in a quicker but safer fashion. Yeah.
Do you want to talk to Marianne?
Well, Marianne, as someone who's been to detox and treatment, I can tell you that what is the most special about going to one of these treatment centers is that when you're in there, it doesn't matter what your substance is. We quickly begin to connect to one another because we all know what it's like, to be addicted to something, to alleviate that sense of discomfort, and that's a very special and intimate connection. And a lot of us, once we have been sober for a few years, we've actually stayed connected to some of the people that we met in treatment because it's that special. You don't expect to feel like you can relate to someone who has a completely different addiction than yours, but when you're there, you realize that all that stuff is the same. What you use is really, that's semantics. Yeah.
And the other thing too is, I bet you had this experience, is people will go at any age. They'll be 16 years old or they're 60 years old, and initially you might be thinking, I have nothing in common with this 19-year-old.
Yeah.
But boy, does that concern ever get wiped out very quickly?
Yeah.
Marianne, I hope that that's very helpful for you, and Godspeed in the recovery, and give us a call back and let us know how you're doing. And thanks so much for calling. We are taking your phone calls tonight. My guests are Dr. Vera Tarman and Dee Christensen. We've had a number of issues out on the table tonight, a lot of them really. We started off with all of the breaking news headlines that have been going on across Canada really, and somewhere around the world as well. They've been quite interested in what's been going on, the allegations against Toronto's mayor and also his councillor brother. But as I mentioned, we're not here to talk about Rob Ford or Doug Ford. We're here to talk about the headlines themselves and how they may be affecting you or someone in your family. Maybe they're bringing issues to the forefront, a spotlight on you. And we've also talked about the celebrity angle. Unfortunately, every aspect of these poor people's lives in Hollywood, the big stars and everything, every aspect it seems to be an open book, which is really, really tough. And I just curious, like when you see the celebrities and it seems like everybody else in the world knows they have a problem, but they seem to be in denial over it. Lindsay Lohan, bless her heart, she's just been through heck and back, and even Charlie Sheen was denying there for a while and then came forward and said, yep, I've got a problem. I'd like to talk a little bit about denial. Dr. Tarman, your thoughts?
Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is again the concept of stigma. I mean, for Charlie Sheen or for anybody, I can relate as a professional. I mean, you're really putting your job on the line, your reputation on the line. Any kind of mental illness has a stigma attached to it, which weakens. You feel like you're weakened. Amongst your colleagues, usually whatever job you're in is very competitive, and so you've now put yourself under a notch. Anything that you've said in the past might be undermined because, was your judgment impaired? Like, you're really having to place a lot of things in jeopardy, so that even if you're aware that you have a problem, it's hard to come forward. But then, of course, with addiction, we know that having the awareness is already a task. I mean, that's the whole concept of denial, which is the number one feature of addiction. Yeah. I don't know, Dee, if you want to share. I'm sure you have your own personal experience.
Well, it's funny,
that.
Whenever I think about a celebrity and addiction, whether, you look back on so many celebrities that have been caught, experiencing their own addiction, what stands out to me is actually the fact that, we always say to ourselves, if only I had these things on the list, my life would be different. If only I had money, if only I had celebrity, if only I had these things. So what I love about opening up this conversation is that we get to say, this is really inside stuff. This is really an inside journey. It doesn't matter where you are, who you are. It doesn't matter what you have. There is no list of 10 things you're going to have. That job of your dreams, those things, those outside things are not going to alleviate this inner angst. This is an inside job, and it doesn't matter who you are, Addiction is not discerning.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something I see in my work all the time. It doesn't matter. I guess addiction, like death, is very democratic. It hits anybody and everybody.
Yeah. When you say it's an inside job, it's your inner being and how you deal with your addiction. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
And how you fix it?
Yeah, when I say it's an inside job, anyone who is living with an addiction knows what I mean. And what that means is that when you're using something, your whole goal is to alleviate that sense of anxiety. And there is nothing that will do that. The very first time you use your drug of choice, it alleviates it just enough that it ties you in. But it doesn't seem to matter what else you feed into it. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what you... That sense of inner angst, that sense of being uncomfortable in your skin isn't alleviated by anything outside of you. So these stories are really a healthy reminder of that it just doesn't matter who you are, that this is, this is one of those things that affects absolutely everybody. It's not something that only affects the poor. It's not something that only affects the wealthy. It's, it's non-discerning. It's an inside job. We have to learn to be uncomfortable, and we have to work through it. So.
Did you have denial when you were using?
Did I have denial? I kind of knew the first time that I ever got drunk and the first time I got high, I knew there was something wrong. I knew the very first time.
Like you liked it too much.
Yeah, I knew. And I actually remember distinctly the first time I got drunk. And I will say that my recovery probably began not when I got sober, but when I got drunk, because I was in so much pain inside that it was the first time I ever got to experience being inside my own skin and not being in pain. So I'm really grateful to be a recovering alcoholic and addict today, because that became the foothills of what would later become learning to be in my skin completely sober. But the first time I was drunk was the first time I was ever in my skin and not in pain. So when you're getting sober, you're sort of grieving an old friend, because that old friend turns on you in the end. But in the beginning, that old friend alleviated a lot of inner turmoil, right? So, yeah.
Dee, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Really powerful stuff. We're talking to Dee Christensen from Recovery Wire magazine and Dr. Vera Tarman. We're going to take another break here on Living Clean, Living Well. Our phone lines are open for you. We're also going to be discussing the DSM-5 and how it's going to affect you. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Lots of headlines going on. We addressed some of them before the break. There's also big headlines going on within the medical world about the DSM-5 that has recently come out. And I was telling you off the top of the show, it's going to affect a great many people. It's very controversial. There's been a lot of backlash. In fact, the National Institute of Mental Health, which is the world's largest funding agency for research into mental health, has indicated now that they are withdrawing support for this manual. Apparently their director, Dr. Thomas Insel, said that they have recently they always have thrown their weight and funding behind earlier editions of the manual. So this is version 5 that's come out. They are now reorienting their research away from all DSM categories, and they say that the weakness of the manual is its lack of validity. Now it's got a lot of people very, very concerned, because as we were talking earlier, Dr. Tarman, at the beginning of the show, and also Dee, it's concerning a lot of people because it's changing how people are being diagnosed. So maybe you could just do a quick recap for us, Dr. Tarman, on this DSM-5 and how it affects and why we should affects this and why we should be worried about it. What do people need to know?
Well, before I get to that, I mean, if agencies large agencies like this National Institute of Mental Health don't support it, then it means that the common language that physicians have to talk about conditions is starting to fracture, and so that my definition of depression or anxiety is going to be different than somebody else's, or they might say, "Are you basing that on a DSM-5 or a DSM-4?" It's going to make things much more confusing. But I think that really what I think, what I worry about personally myself, and of course I'm reading into the future here. I don't know if this will happen, but this is the thing that we worry about, is that when you get a diagnosis, the expectation that the patient has the expectation that this is something now that they are burdened with for the rest of their life, and takes away from the fact that it's just a category that a bunch of people have gotten together, sat down, and came up with. And it has implications when things are so diluted, where any negative feeling is now a pathology. It means that it requires something outside of tools that you already have that you could otherwise use. how this may affect you is that you may end up being diagnosed with something that you actually aren't.
And
You actually don't have that condition.
You were saying you're very frightened with this DSM-5. Why?
I am. I'm really nervous about it. I'm nervous about it because I think, as I've said, I think it allows for a lot of people to be labeled things as opposed to focusing on the actual behavior. We're now going to be focusing on labeling people. So, you know, whenever I talk to mothers who are worried about their children being diagnosed with something and having that follow them all the way through the school system, now you should be really worried because now there's even more opportunities to be diagnosing and labeling people with an even broader spectrum.
Yeah, like we're labeling kids as like babies with attention deficit. Not babies, but like young with a bipolar disorder.
Yeah. There's a new criteria for bereavement as a depression.
Yeah.
So really what we're saying is that basic healthy sadness is no longer basic healthy sadness. And you know,
It's something that should be medicated, which goes into the
or
fears
seen
for
as something wrong with, as opposed to this is a normal part of life.
And I will say we have a tendency to say, well, you know, something is better than nothing and it will get us to the next level. But the reality is, for most people that end up getting sober, we end up getting sober because the discomfort is so bad we get sober. If you gave me something, just a little bit of something to alleviate that, it might have taken me years longer, if ever, you know? So I think to some extent that discomfort is something I earned and I needed to use it to propel me forward. If you alleviate that just enough, I might stay in that little metaphoric purgatory for years and not get sober.
Dee, let me just ask you this question. In the past, to be given a label was considered a bad thing. But I just wonder if now, if getting a label is almost turned the other way. People now will want the label. Like it's no longer a bad thing, but a positive thing.
Well, it's a way of explaining toxic behavior or behavior that you're struggling with.
But it's explaining away.
Yeah, and you know, I've said people who authentically suffer from these mental illnesses, in my opinion, utilize medication as a means of stepping up to their recovery. If you're using this as a means of negating having to enter recovery, that's a concern for me, right? Those are two different things.
We're going to go back to our phone lines, and on line one, Donna's calling in from Brampton tonight. Hi there, Donna. Welcome to our show. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I guess I just want to say, first off about labels. I had a label. I was an alcoholic. I went to Renaissance for recovery. I ended up quitting drinking because I landed in the hospital, and they told me if I have another drink, I will die. So that was one label I carried. Come to find out that I have another label. I do suffer from mental illness, and that came from finding out that I was covering my mental illness with alcohol. And I guess my fear is that not one label is better than the other, because there are a lot of mental illness people out there that are doing some crazy things as well. I have several labels in mental illness, and I'm quite happy now, actually, with the medications that I'm on. They are the same under the old number 4 as they are under the number 5. And just recently, I got switched onto a pile of different meds than I was on prior, and the prior meds that I was on, I was in like this comatose state because of these weird meds that I thought were doing me wonderful things, but because I wasn't drinking. But these new meds that I've been on now for 3 months, I'm like a whole new person. Like I was agoraphobic, and I couldn't go anywhere, and I was still depressed all the time, and now I'm like this whole new person. I can go out and see people, and I'm here on the phone. I'm talking with you guys. So I guess I'm kind of afraid that we don't want to scare everybody away from the mental illness label, even though it is another label.
Yes, I think really the message that I would like to give today is to have the person, the patient, the listener, the audience, be more discerning and take responsibility in you yourself. Does this feel like the gut truth to me. The gospel truth that physicians have had for, they've been given that authority, is not necessarily a gospel truth. I think that's the thing that DSM-5 has really shown us, is that we don't hold the truth. We thought that we did, but we don't. It's so that the patient themselves needs to be part of that conversation to say, yeah, that feels right, or no, that doesn't feel right. I'd like to explore that a bit further.
Donna, great call. Thank you so much. Let's go down to line 2. Peggy's calling in from Brantford. Hi, Peggy.
Hi, thank you so kindly for taking my phone call.
Our pleasure.
Why I called in is I find that if I share that I have a mental illness or a disability, a weakness, that society, people, groups of people like church, that kind of thing, they shun me. They don't want nothing to do with me, don't want me to be involved, and they, I'm not perfect and I don't fit in. And so I find that also that it gives others the okay to treat me badly or discriminatory or differently because I'm weaker, and they perceive that I'm not going to do something about it. And I don't know if you find that or not, but that's what I find.
Yeah, Dee, I'd love to hear your perspective.
That is why I certainly don't want it to ever come across as if I don't support the mental health, or that I don't think that people have mental illnesses. What I think is that we need to focus on the behavior and not the label. I think we need to ask ourselves why the label is important. I understand it as a diagnostic perspective, but once you leave that doctor's office, focusing on your similarities with people in your community, that's the stuff. Because what's fascinating is, whatever you've been diagnosed with, if you actually shared with most members of the community what the criteria are, as opposed to the label, if you drop the label and simply share the experience, I bet you 9 times out of 10 people will be able to relate. But instead, as soon as we attach some kind of a label to it, we need to ask ourselves why that needs to happen. And the important part, like I said, is focusing on your similarities and not your differences. That's a great way to connect to people and to feel closer to people. The label is what I think separates.
Yeah. A brief follow-up, Dr. Tarman?
No, I think you said it really well. I totally agree with you there. The label is useful for the doctor. It's useful for the communication between physicians and patient. But once the patient leaves, it's all about, this is the label I have now. What am I going to do about this? And that I love that. That's a much better approach.
Which is not to say that it's something to be ashamed of. It's not about that.
It's just not useful.
Not at all. It's just not useful.
No. Yeah. I'm so glad you called in, Peggy. Thank you very much. Now, if you folks live in the Southern Ontario region, we've got an event coming up that you might be interested in. Why don't you tell them about Gala 12?
So Gala 12, we're really excited about it because we're launching a series, and this is a premiere event. So what we're wanting to do is redefine what it means to party in recovery. So we're throwing an amazing gala.
Is this the first one you're doing?
This is the first one that we're doing, and we've hired a 3-piece jazz band, and we have an amazing club DJ that's going to be playing from 10 o'clock on, and we have some amazing tapas, and we have mocktails. So we're going to have really fancy little drinks. They're just going to be non-alcoholic drinks, and it's going to be a party not to be missed. So and
it's a fundraiser too, you were
saying.
And
it's a fundraiser, but mostly our goal is just to redefine what it means to be someone who's partying in recovery. We can have just as much fun, and it can be just as upscale as it used to be. It doesn't have to be in a church basement with paper cups. We can do it up like everybody else does it up. So it'll be a really amazing party.
And how do people get tickets?
They can get tickets right on our website at www.recoverywiremagazine.com.
That's awesome. We've got the information for you on the screen as well. So, and what date is that?
That is for June 15th, and it's right downtown Toronto.
Maybe folks would like to fly out for it if you're watching from other points in Canada tonight. And also, we've been getting some calls from the U.S. So there you go, a great event to tell you about. When we come back, we are going to have final thoughts from Dr. Vera Tarman and Dee Christensen. You're watching Living Clean, Living Well. We'll be right back. Spirited discussion and lots of great info. Dr. Tarman, your final thoughts.
Well, the DSM-5 has just come out. I think it was May 14th. We are going to be hearing a lot more about it here on the show and certainly in the press. The message that I want to leave with you is just in the future, be discerning about diagnosis and make sure that you're part of the discussion.
And Dee, your final thoughts?
It's time to clean house, guys. We're heading into summer. This is a fun annual thing to get in the habit of doing. It's a great way to set yourself up for the year. So get a copy of the magazine and follow our top 10 rules, and you're going to have a great summer.
Coming up next week, we've got Andrew Walton and Jim McKinney from New Awakenings coming in to see us. Always a great show when those two gentlemen are here. I've got a little business to attend to, so our executive producer, Sanderson Lang, will be stepping in for that show. So I hope that you're able to join them next Sunday on CTS right here on Living Clean, Living Well. Dr. Tarman, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. I always love coming in.
And Dee, great to have you here.
Great to be here.
And Recovery Wire magazine, people can go on your website and get a free copy.
That's right.
Wonderful. So folks, thanks again for joining us. I'll see you in a couple weeks, but don't forget, Sanderson is here next week. Until then, have a great week, everybody, and I'll see you soon.